On today's episode, we dissect how the media has been so hard on President Biden, how Elon Musk skipped 34 billion lattes in order to earn his wealth, how Stalin just went down in history as a bad person in spite of making the world a better place, and lastly, how a libertarian in Wyoming is simping for the government. This is Cringe Posts. Hey friends, and welcome to this episode of the Cringe Post podcast, the show where we look at those posts you see on your feed that just make you bristle. Maybe you don't have time to break down exactly why they're wrong, and so we're here to do that for you. My name is Donald.
And I'm Burt.
And before we tear down other people's posts, we recognize that we all have bad posts. We all have stupid things we put online, and so we tear down our own posts before. So today we look at our co-host Britt's post, and this one wasn't that long ago, which is, in the relative, we've been looking at things from like over a decade ago. This one's, at this point is, it's like 6 years ago, but still in the relative scheme of our self cringes, this one's a more recent one. So in April of 2015, we have Britt saying, "The best proof I have that time is relative is not Einstein's theory of relativity, but that 30 minutes feels like 4 hours in my statistics class." And the choice comment here comes from a friend who says, "Once again, folks, my roommate trying to sound smart in front of the crowd." Totally calling you out there, just
he was right.
Putting it all out, and just really
he was right. He was right, and that's why it's so cringe.
Totally.
It's not the worst cringy post necessarily, because you and I were just talking about before this, like the stats class at NU was brutal. Like it was my least favorite class I ever took there. But at this point in my life, and like I'm saying, it's only 6 years ago. I think I was like a sophomore in college, and I was like, oh, I want to come across as witty or whatever. And the guy that commented, he was my roommate at the time, and really good friend. And you have a good friend when they like see through to the heart of who you are, and they're like okay with like making fun of you to make sure that you kind of get these things out of yourself. So I really appreciate that guy saying what he said, because he was right. I was trying to be witty in front of a crowd. I guess I'm still trying to do that today, right?
It's fun. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I was gonna say we have an endless supply here because in a couple years we'll just look at episode 1 of this, and we'll just have cringe posts there from there on out. But no, it is funny because to bring up the point of you're saying of having a good friend to keep you in check in those ways, it makes me think of sort of the general philosophy. I want to say Jordan Peterson brought this up. I could be mistaken, but the concept of like how when you say things, like when you tell a joke or when you make some kind of remark to another person, their reaction is kind of this small feedback of how it's interpreted. You see their reaction if they enjoy it, they laugh, or they raise their eyebrows like, "Oh, I didn't know that," or if it's sort of like a cringe or a a recoiling of some kind, and you sort of internalize that. And so the more you interact with people, the more you have that sort of soundboard back of what constitutes normal or good behavior. And so in that way, like good friends like that, like people who call you out in that kind of way, and especially in this way where it's sort of done in a lighthearted manner, but it's it's still that sort of that bounce back of like, hey, I know what you're doing, like correct yourself a little bit there, and that is a good trait to have in a friend.
Yes, it's a very good trait, and people should surround themselves with people like that, because at least speaking from my experience, surrounding myself with people like that has done me dividends in progressing in life.
Totally. Well, and I will say I'm still shocked when I get Facebook's little, 2 years ago you posted this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was 2 years. That sounds terrible. That's so cringy. Oh, how is this 2 years ago? So, we're even though I like to think my cringe posts are in the past, they're dangerously close to me as well. So, anyway, without further ado, we'll go ahead and move into our first post of the episode. And this one is our good friend, Occupy Democrats, one of the best Facebook pages out there for cringe takes. Occupy Democrats posts, "Anyone else sick and tired of the media being so hard on President Biden after the 4 years of hell we all lived through under Trump?" And then it attributes the quote. What? I'm sorry. What? The phrase like we're living in different realities or we're just not seeing the same things as other people gets thrown around a lot. And this is a very good example of that because I don't know about you, but I don't know that Biden's having that hard of a time under the media. Maybe under alternative media, maybe under independent voices and journalists, but not under the corporate mainstream media.
Well,
not at all.
Yeah, the thing about it, like the second I saw this one, I instantly thought of the most recent like town hall he did with Anderson Cooper, where he literally had these memory slips where he could not remember what he was talking about mid-sentence, and Anderson Cooper like had to lead him on about like what to say and you know, kind of like fill in the gaps for him. And it's like, yeah, imagine them doing that for Trump. Like that would never happen. And I think some of this, like, the thing about the media, like the media has been like gotten a little bit hard on Biden in certain ways because you have to in order to maintain any like shred of integrity or veil that you like do report the news, because anyone with eyes can see the guy is bumbling around and failing. So you kind of got to give something to people that you're like objective, or else you give the whole game away. You know, it's funny because I think the Trump presidency to me was defined by how hostile it was between like the White House and the media. And I think a lot of people say this, but I think one of the main reasons he got elected was because he was willing to kind of just, you know, slap them in the face and say, you guys suck and this is what it is. And a lot of people really like that because they've been, you know, being talked down to for years and years and years by these folks. And now they had a guy punching for them. And even though he wasn't necessarily really for them, he made the appearance of it. And that fight was what projected him to the White House.
Totally, yeah. And it's funny because I was seeing this meme that someone made of all the different articles talking about the inflation of the Biden administration, and like specifically these corporate media articles, how like first it was like there's no inflation, it's just a Republican talking point, like Trump's making this up or something like that. And then the second one's like, here's why the inflation seems scary, but it's just on normal par for the course. And then the third one, it seems we might be in an uphill, but that's because inflation always comes up before it comes down. And then lastly, here's why the increased inflation is actually a good thing. You know, it's like they are doing everything they can to carry water for this administration. And so it's like, yeah, there are, like you said, there are moments where they have to sort of like go along with reality, right? Like they can't completely deny that Biden wasn't able to string together a coherent sentence, or they can't totally deny that inflation is happening before our eyes, but they're doing everything they can to cover for that in spite of having to admit some semblance of truth. And then also I just want to say, like, the 4 years of hell we lived through under Trump, I mean, goodness, who made it hell but the media? Like, when you think about actual things that happened in the Trump administration, from a day-to-day perspective, was it noticeably worse than things happening in the Biden administration? I mean, like, yeah, like there were countries overseas we were still bombing. Yemen's still a wreck, but that's no different than today, right? Like Yemen's still just as, if not worse, more worse off than it was under Trump. Inflation's going up now more than it was under Trump. Not to say that, you know, it's only because Biden's in there now. I think it's all the COVID stimulus, but it's like, just from almost every measurable aspect that you can, life is not noticeably worse in the Trump years than the Biden years by any reasonable metric, except maybe in political discourse, which I'd say it's probably pretty bad now, if not worse. But who are the ones making that awful? But the media screeching every 3 seconds about how Trump was a Russian spy and asset, which turned out to be a big nothing burger, of course. It's just really funny that these people just sort of make up these fairy tales like, oh, the years under Trump, those were hell. These ones now, these ones are fine. The years under Trump, absolute hell. And it's like, you're no better than like bringing back America to its glory days under Make America Great Again that you criticize so much.
Yeah, I totally agree. My last thing on this, kind of on your point about like, you know, about America or your life being worse under, you know, one president or the other. You know, for most of my lifetime, you know, the only thing that presidents did that really touched my life was like potentially war, right? Like I, you know, had friends that would go do stuff, or I knew people that were shipped over there or whatnot. But this time, like with the vaccine mandates and everything, and, you know, people getting fired, like I actually see the effects of, you know, this presidency like directly right here, right now, right? And I think a lot of people are feeling that, because I mean, maybe this is conjecture, but I think that if Trump was president, maybe there wouldn't be the hey, all employees with 100 employees or more need to vaccinate mandate, you know, which is still obviously being put up there, but I don't know. And that's kind of like with the media going back to, like, they have to say something because the effect that this president has had on the general like world, it's like, look around, right? Like, you got to be a little bit hard on him or else people are going to get wise to the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we pointed out many times, if Trump were here and if he did try to do those like 100 employee mandates or something, then the media would be talking about how he was an authoritarian dictator instead of saying, no, this is a proper use of OSHA authority or whatever. Yeah. So once again, the media is not being so hard on President Biden, really, really, really by any measurable metric. Okie dokie. So on to our next post. We have a post from Instagram quoting someone from a tweet. So we have the tweet reading, Elon Musk is now worth $208 billion. You want to know how he did it? He skipped 34.67 billion lattes. It's that easy. And of course, this is sort of a tongue-in-cheek, smarmy take about, you know, oh man, just don't buy avocado toast and you'll be rich. You know, like making fun of that idea by saying like, that's all you had to do to get it. But of course, these are also the same kind of people who don't realize that you do have to create value in order to be as successful as he is from scratch. Unless there's, you know, a lot of corruption going on, which is by and large the minority.
Yeah, I specifically thought of this one because it kind of was in tandem with did you see the World, I think it was the World Health Organization or the UN, like hunger or whatever organization that globally is responsible for like alleviating world hunger. But they tweeted out like, the director of it tweeted out, like Elon Musk with, 6% of his wealth could solve world hunger. And Elon Musk called his bluff. He was like, okay, like I'll give you $6 billion, but the caveat is that you have to tell me exactly where you're going to spend it and how $6 billion is going to solve world hunger. It was like to me, one of the best checkmates I've seen on social media in months at this point, right? Because obviously they're not going to be able to do that. Last year they had $8.4 billion to solve world hunger and they didn't even come close, to figure it out. And that's kind of the whole thing about, this hatred of billionaires, right? It's like the discipline that says, hey, I'm not going to go get a latte today, and I'm not going to do that for the next 365 days, right, is the decision that says, hey, I'm going to have an extra $5,000 in my bank account in 2 years, right? And that is $5,000. If you're going to make the good decision about the latte, how much better of a decision are you going to make with that $5,000? Like if you're going to put in some sort of investment or maybe use it as a down payment on a business or, in maybe other places other than Seattle, it can contribute towards like a down payment on a house, which continues to yield you, results. And that's what these millennials, I guess, like if I'm going to adopt the boomer language that they're trying to make fun of. So this is kind of very meta, a very meta cringe, right? Because it's a cringe making fun of a cringe of a cringe. But that's the truth that's that's ingrained in the like, hey, if you're faithful with the small stuff, like it's going to be easier and easier to get the big stuff because the decisions that cause you to make good decisions with small stuff is going to help you make better decisions with big stuff.
Absolutely. I think one of the interesting things about this is it's like when you're talking about the kind of person who's going to have that discipline to not buy the lattes, the interesting thing about that is it's like when people say, cut out avocado toast, cut out the latte, cut out whatever it is from your budget and so to get your life together. The funny thing is like the people who need that advice are usually the ones who are so habitually into those kinds of things that they are putting that ahead of the smart decisions. Yeah. Whereas someone who's making wise decisions, even if they're not Elon Musk rich, can probably afford to get a latte every now and then. They can budget for it. They can treat themselves. They don't have to make their life a living hell. But the idea is that you do everything, you prioritize, you have discipline. And so I think a lot of the takes of those boomers just eliminate this is such a simplification and reduction that then takes like this cringe poster like, look, all he had to do was skip, 34 billion lattes. And it's like, no, the lack of nuance in the boomer meme is that you need to have the discipline to prioritize. You need to budget. You need to be like, can I actually have this latte as a treat and treat it as a treat, not as a necessity, right? Like, you can live in a comfortable manner, but you need to be able to sacrifice if you want the big things that you need to sacrifice for. So it's just frustrating because it's like there's so much low-hanging fruit that people offer when they put these simplified memes out there. About like all you got to do is cut out avocado toast. It's like, well, no, you can go out and like treat your spouse or your significant other to a nice meal, or pick them up a coffee when they're tired from work. That's fine, but have a budget for it. That comes out of your, like your leisure spending, and then you got to put everything else towards your house saving. That kind of a thing where it's all about the mindset, and that's again what you were talking about too, where it's like someone who has that mindset of being able to delay your gratification is going to be the one to be able to spend it wisely and duplicate it and multiply it.
Yeah, it made me think of this meme I saw this past week where it was like of this dude like putting ingredients into like a soup, and like he'd put one ingredient in and it was like enabling my own laziness, like, and then another one of like illiterate on economics, and then another one's like just being butthurt, and then the pot it says it says the left can't meme, right? And that's like the whole thing about like the left, right? Is that it's like their memes, they're so behind because it's not necessarily like based in any sort of truth, because truth is funny, right? Or when truth exposes a lie, it's really funny. But for them, like they just meme out of that, right? They're trying to like that, and that's what this kind of like take is like, well, I just want to enable my worst, instincts, and that's kind of the sinister undertone of these type of takes. And obviously, like you're saying, like the boomer thing of like, well, just eliminate avocado toast and you'll be able to buy a $600,000 house. Like that's not true, right? Necessarily, but like it is true in a different sense, and it's true, I think, in the important way.
Yeah, agreed. Well, and then, of course, since we were dunking on millennials, just to get back at the boomers real quick, then of course you have the articles coming out that are like, why are millennials killing the diamond industry? Why millennials are killing the napkin industry? It's like, maybe because we want to save up and like buy a house. I don't know. So,
good thing.
It just makes me laugh. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. We'll move on to our next cringe post. Oh my gosh. And this one is an Instagram image, and it is it's the format of sort of like push the button, and if you push the button, this, but this. So you have a picture of this hand over a red button, and the caption goes, if you push the button, you save the world and make it a better place, but you go down in history as a bad person. And then under is a picture of Stalin, of all people. Freaking Stalin with the USSR and communism and red, Russian logo. Like, my goodness. Yeah, Stalin did go down in history as a bad person. Saving the world and making it a better place is not the reason why he went in history, though. I think quite the opposite. And, maybe I'm just in the Matrix here, because they did push that. He pushed that button, and I'm just one of the many voices saying things like bread lines are bad, shooting your own people is bad, making sure that your country is so poor and economically crippled that an entire coalition of what was seen to be one of the world's superpowers crumbles nearly overnight. I see all those things as bad personally. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm the idiot here in the Matrix.
Yeah,
I don't know.
So I had to, like, I was like, this can't be serious, right? Like, there can't be people that make this argument. Like, I feel like it's kind of universally understood that Stalin was a bad person. And yeah, you can have well, that wasn't real communism or whatever you want to call it. But like, yeah, he killed a lot of people. And so I started looking through some different forums, and I was looking on Quora. And like, this actually is a belief that some lefties hold, which is that Stalin is a good person because without him, the Allies wouldn't have defeated the Nazis. And then I even saw comments where people were like, hey, but like he killed 60 million people. And then people that think Stalin's a good person was like, no, that's disputed. It might have been more like 10 million people that he killed. And then they offer up all these like weird rationalizations. They're like, well, like the 60 million people includes all the people in World War II. And I'm not disputing. Like, no one actually knows how many people died because so many people died and no one kept track of it. So that's kind of the fact of the matter, right? Is that it's at least over 1 million people. And I think at what point body count becomes you're a bad person when you kill an innocent person, I think it's probably over one. Like one person, not 1 million, one person. So by that measure, I think Stalin is a bad person.
And you could probably jump on those forums and talk with those people on a different topic, and they would probably also start exaggerating the body count of COVID.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Wait, you're making excuses for someone who killed, like, you're saying only 10 million, and then you're freaking out and saying we need everyone to be vaccinated and jab over a disease that has not killed a fraction of that, a fraction of a fraction. My goodness. It's funny because I even remember, not that this is any great political insight, but just sort of gauging the culture. Creatives and people on YouTube tend to be lefty and stuff like that. And I remember in high school when Epic Rap Battles of History was very, very popular. One of the season finales was all the different Russian leaders. And I remember at one point, Stalin's included or whatever, and they kind of make fun of him, right? He's talking about everyone's shot, your wife, you're the pierogi maker on the street, whatever. And then I don't remember exactly how it plays out. It's been years since I've seen it, but someone in there, either Lenin himself or some Marxist of some kind, says like, you took like that, what I think it was Lenin. I think he said, you took what I built and ruined it and turned it into your own selfish bad thing. So like even in sort of the cultural context of some generic lefty, it's like the idea is like, yeah, Stalin was an abuse of the perfect idyllic society that Lenin was set up in the vision of Marx. Like Stalin was the guy who perverted the dream. He's the one who turned it from the communist dream into not real communism because he was an authoritarian or something like that. So the fact that modern day, I think these modern, I don't know if they're like totally just brainwashed college kids, or if they're people who just get in their own bubbles, like deep in the online, like, academic circles or whatever. However you get to that point of being a Stalin apologist, I just think you have to do a lot of internal justifying of a lot of very bad things, and you have to have a lot of cognitive dissonance for that to add up in your head, I think.
Yeah, as I've thought about this, and I'll talk about this conversation I had with a gal a few weeks back, but like, our generation and some of the past generations were raised with like Judeo-Christian morals, but we tried to separate the Judeo-Christian morals from like the foundation, which is like Christianity and God, and there is a moral lawgiver, right? And so like, I think what kind of results in is like people being peculiar, like pragmatist about how they get to like certain results. And what I mean by that is like, I had this conversation with a gal a few weeks back, and we were talking about just kind of the foundations of morality and God and stuff like that. And I was trying to like get us to get to some consensus about like what is evil? How would you define evil? And I said, well, would you define like murder as evil? Like, and like what I mean by that is like killing a person who has done nothing wrong, has no threat to you, is not trying to aggress upon you, like just killing them because like you're going to kill them. And I expected like, oh, that would be an easy thing for us to agree on. And this gal said, she's like, no, like I think in some instances murder would be okay. For instance, we're facing a population crisis. And I was like, holy crap. Like this is like a random person on the street, that I'm talking with and chatting with, not a random person on the street, but a random person I'm hanging out with, that's in a group of friends. And I think when you start the kind of like that spirit that makes a person say, well, I think it would be okay to murder people because we're facing overpopulation, is the same spirit that makes people want to say, oh, well, Stalin was good because he was trying to get towards communism, which is the ultimate good. And yeah, maybe there were a few broken eggs along the way, but at least we made an omelet. But they didn't even really make an omelet, so I guess that point is kind of moot. But yeah, and I think that's what's so scary about
expecting
the
USSR to make. Oh, just to make any sense of a food pun is a high expectation.
Yes. Yeah, it was more like how many bones they could gnaw on, I guess. But yeah, and that's what's so terrifying though, right, about these folks, is that they've got all of the, and I think C.S. Lewis or J.R.R. Tolkien wrote about it, but he's like, the terrifying thing about like a moral authoritarian is that they will persecute us for our own good, right? And so these folks have all of the desire to do something that they think is good, but none of the foundation, and what that leads to is inevitably just great evil.
Yes, sir. We're in agreement there. Unless you have anything else to add, I think that was a great summation, and we'll move on to our final cringe post, and this one I'm excited to talk about because I'm torn on it in a sense, but regardless, the post itself and just the action of it just gives me this like gut feeling of cringe. So we'll talk about this. So the tweet reads, "Today, Wyoming Representative Marshall Burt, the only libertarian to win a state legislative seat in 20 years, gave an emotional floor speech about how he's about to be fired under his employer's vaccine policy, and that he's voting against the bill to ban that, insisting they have the right to fire him. For what it's worth, he says he already had COVID. Refusing to get the vaccine is certainly not my cup of tea, and I think employers requiring it is fine. But it was an interesting moment all the same, pointedly refusing to ban it even with that personal stake in the matter." Okay, so let me lay out here. So first of all, I think the biggest easy low-hanging cringe here is like refusing to get it. The vaccine is certainly not my cup of tea, and I think employers requiring it's fine. Okay, well, no one cares what you think. Shut up. That's stupid. Like, regardless of mandates, employers requiring this vaccine is stupid, and you thinking it's fine is stupid.
Yeah.
That's done. But the actual content of it is interesting because there is something inherently cringy and kind of pathetic to me about going in front of Congress, groveling, in the sense that you're like, I'm going to lose my job because my employer's making me take this vaccine from a giant pharmaceutical company that the media and the government have propagandized everyone into taking, and I'm not going to vote to make this to stop other companies from firing people like me who don't want to buy into the propaganda. There's something so inherently cringy about that, about saying like, look, I recognize all the things, like I'm trying to think for myself. I don't think that I need to get this vaccine because I've had COVID, I have the antibodies, whatever. But I'm still not going to stop this like continued authoritarian steamroll. There's something inherently cringy in that. But I also do struggle with the concept of creating a law on the books that tells a government what they can and can't prohibit. So, you know, in the context of we already have laws that do this type of thing, that prohibit a business from discriminating on something like race or gender or whatever, I think this, in the sense of compared to laws we already have, a ban of this kind of vaccine requirement would not be the most offensive. But I also somewhat hesitate to add something like that on the books. So I'm curious, what's your take on it here,
well,
Brett?
Yeah, so this is what I found cringy about it. And I if this was any random person and they were saying, because I have this kind of mindset too, it's like, hey, like I don't think the government should mandate vaccines, and I also don't think the government should mandate that employers can't, you know, enforce, like have some sort of vaccine mandate for themselves, right? Because it like what if you take care of a bunch of autoimmune compromised people, right? Like that's like part of like making sure that those people feel safe and they are genuinely at risk, you know, of getting COVID and dying. But where this became cringy is who is saying it, right? He's a government representative, and he's like saying, he's like trying to take this like stand of like, ooh, I'm so principled libertarian that like I won't even vote to protect myself. And it's like, dude, if you were a principled libertarian, you wouldn't even be in the legislative branch, you know, in that state. Like, you make laws all the time, and so what you're doing is you're like chickening out when you know that this is going to violate other people's, you know, God-given rights. Like, it's like the one thing you're good for is to stand up against these type of things, and you're going to flake out on like principle or whatever that you don't actually hold. So I just don't think this dude actually holds the principle. And obviously, you know, I don't feel bad about revealing this guy's identity, but it's Andy Craig, you know, the libertarian. He's not really libertarian, but he is libertarian. You know, Loser Brigade guy. That's
formerly
of the
Libertarian
he left the
Party.
Libertarian Party.
He did leave.
Yeah.
He did leave. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. He still likes pugs. I saw on his Twitter thing though. And what's so cringy? It's like this dude. You know, he's such like a smarmy dude that's like, look, this is a real libertarian standing on principle. It's like, dude, a real libertarian, you know, that wouldn't believe in enforcing any sort of stuff, and most of all, not being part of the legislature that hands down this stuff. Like, I hope that this, I'd like to go look up this guy's voting record, but I hope he votes no on every single bill Like if he's going to be consistent, he would have to do that.
Yeah.
I doubt he does that, but maybe he does. I don't know. I'm not going to advocate or say that he does or doesn't do something if I don't really know, but that's just what made it cringe to me. It's like, you're a representative, dude. Like, your job, people elected you to like stand up for certain things. So if you're going to violate that principle, of having the power over other people, at the enforcement of the state or federal government, like, you might as well use it for like what they elected you for and for like standing up for people's rights. And yeah, it's kind of like it seems like discombobulated, and like he's not actually like, what is that called? I'm losing the word.
Are you talking about like having that cognitive dissonance or something
Cognitive
like that?
dissonance. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah. So I see what you're saying there, and I agree. I think, like, for instance, if you're gonna vote no on something like this, I think it's so much more important, rather than highlighting your own personal sacrifice in isolation, saying, I'm gonna lose my job over this. I think it's probably so much better to say something along the lines, I'm going to lose my job for this. So, I'm not just trying to throw everyone else under the bus. I'm throwing myself under too. But also employers requiring a vaccine that's being pushed out by the government and by the media is wrong. It's stupid. Everyone should be looking to do their own research on this. And we need to push back on this being a requirement of employment. And that's always one of the things, like, when it comes to things like this, which almost fall into the culture war because it's a private business or whatever. When you're in a position like that where you can use the power of government to make things, molding society to the way you want it to, where you and I wouldn't really view that as an ethical means. It's all the more important when you're in that position and you have some kind of voice and some kind of platform to use that voice and use that platform to try to sway the culture in a way that is right. So it's like, I highly doubt Andy Craig would be lauding this representative if his speech went like, look, I don't believe in using the power of government to tell employers who they can and can't hire. So I'm voting against this. I'm going to lose my job. This sucks. But ultimately, we also need to recognize that it is, in fact, this body, this government, this state government, as well as the federal government that's pushed this vaccine on people, and it's been insane. And the fact that employers are even thinking of requiring it is only due to this collusion of government, big pharma, and media, three-way attack on the people. And this is stupid. And you know what I mean? Like, if he pushed that out in his speech, and if that was the focus, rather than sort of this groveling of like, I'm just trying to be on principle. Screw that. Like, no one cares about that. What they care about is like why are you doing this? Like what's the effect? How does it affect me? And those kinds of things. So it's like, use your platform in that way, where you're pushing employers to not want to require this, and saying, look, as a government, I'm not going to make you not require it, but I'm telling you, you absolutely should not require it because it's stupid. I think that would make it a much better, much more compelling and effective move, something where I would be like, yeah, I respect that, rather than this kind of pathetic turn. But yeah, I guess that's kind of how I see that, at least. The other thing that's, that you have to consider too is like Andy Craig, like, talking about this guy like losing his job over this. I think what else kind of makes it really cringy is the fact that he left the Libertarian Party, and he left it after the wake of the whole, for people who are familiar with Libertarian Party insider politics, there was this whole scandal about the New Hampshire affiliate trying to oust members of the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus, which is, a little bit less woke and progressive than some other wings. It was a whole scandal, and then essentially at the end they sort of did the chair of the entire National Party was seen to potentially be implicated in this kind of scandal, this coup that could involve people's private, credit card data, as well as their address and private information, those kinds of things. So it's kind of a big deal. He steps down before he can get indicted, and a bunch of people do, sort of in solidarity with this more lefty kind of libertarianism. And so that's when Andy Craig steps down. And so what makes it really cringy to me is he probably sees himself like this guy, where it's like, I've been a member of the Libertarian Party for 20 years or something like that. Like your badge matters. You know, I have a gold-plated badge because I've been here for long. That's what makes me a good libertarian, not any of my principled positions, right? And so it's like he probably sees himself in that martyr role where I gave up everything to stand on principle because of the bigotry that was joining the LP, when in reality it was just you got caught.
There were better
you know,
people coming in
shady corruption with people you didn't like. Yeah, exactly. So that kind of also strikes me as pretty cringy.
Yeah, I just think that if you're going to be like if you're going to violate like the non-aggression principle and and choose to be an elected representative that has control over people that might not have elected you in the first place, it's like, well, like you violated that principle, and now there is someone else that is trying to come, because I mean I don't know if the business itself is like subject to the 100-person mandate, but it very likely might be. So like, okay, now there's another aggressor that is using, you know, force to force you out of your job and everything, and forcing other people out of their jobs. It's like you kind of if you violate that one principle, you probably should just go do the right thing, you know, and try and advocate for people's freedom, or at least kind of fight back against that, because the people that elected you probably are the people that are going to be fired from it, right? So at least you owe it to those folks. So yeah, that's just the thing I don't like about it. It's like, and that's kind of why I cringe about like libertarians holding office and then like trying to pretend they are like really principled, you know, or they don't have a really well defined like why they are holding office, and this just reeked of like this guy doesn't know who he is or why he does what he does, but he's like caving to some sort of pressure and hasn't really thought through his philosophy.
Yeah, people like this make that meme of, at least it's not the Goberman, of like the don't tread on me foot smashing the snake, but it's like filled with corporate logos or whatever. Yeah. And the thing is that's always been so frustrating about that meme to me is it's like, from my perspective, and at least our branch of libertarianism, it seems like, well, you don't end up with them smashing the snake when you don't have a state actor that's empowering them to do so, right? Yeah. You don't have monopolies that are not serving the consumer base, because ultimately, at least in our history of relative free markets, the only times that you have monopolies that are abusing power is when they're set up by governments or aided, or, you know, competitors are squashed down. That's how you have businesses that are too big to fail, things like that. And the only other histories or monopolies you have in history, or in the U.S.'s history at least, of somewhat resembling our economic system, they were either providing services to people that were high quality and at good cost, or they were propped up by the government. And that's it. And when the systems no longer became viable at a consumer base, either in quality or in price, they either die or the government props them up. And so it's always frustrating, because it's like, at least it's not the government getting tried. It's like, well, you're sort of pushing a false idea there, where you're showing all these corporations, but really the person whose foot it is the government, right? They're the ones that are pushing the big corporations onto you. And so it's really frustrating, because you never want to carry water for the government. That's the phrase that I've heard from good libertarian thinkers. I can't remember his name at the moment, but never carry water for the enemy. Never carry water for the government, in this sense. And it's like when you're doing this, when you're saying like, well, no, we're not going to use the power of state to require employers to not be able to discriminate or whatever. You're not using the power of government there. Like, you better not be giving them a pass, though. And that's what this seems like you're doing. You're just saying, well, no, I just believe that it's a free business that can do what it wants. End of discussion. It's like, no, you got to say it's a free private business, but it's been propped up by the government. The government's been pushing this. The government's been propagandizing. The media's been in collusion with the government to do this. Big pharmaceuticals in bed with the government pushing this. It is absolutely the government behind this. And so, yeah, again, it's like, yes, it is a private business choosing whether or not they want to require a vaccine mandate. It also is because of this insane amount of pressure from the government and this insane propaganda campaign coming out of the government. So it's frustrating, right? Because then you get caught, and then you have people like this that represent libertarianism to the mainstream, and they're like, oh, look, it is just sort of someone who bows with the wind, and at least it's not the government that's choking me to death right now.
Yep. Yeah. I don't have any more on this one if you don't.
All right. Nope. I think that will do it for this episode. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a share to your friends. Leave us a like, a comment, all that good stuff. We're growing and we just want to keep on growing, and we appreciate that. So make sure to share this and leave a review if you enjoyed your time here. So with that, we will see you on the next one. Thanks so much for stopping in.
See ya.